The sun was already high when Sheriff Elias Boone rode into the heart of Dustwell. The wind carried the scent of dry earth and horse sweat, and every creak of a saloon door or jingle of a spur echoed through the sleepy main street. Dustwell wasn't much of a town, just a stretch of dusty road lined with wooden buildings and dreams too stubborn to die. Still, it was home for Elias. For 8 years he had been the law here, fair, firm, and quiet. The townsfolk trusted him because he didn't talk much, and when he did, his words carried weight. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, and didn't smile unless there was reason to. Folks said he had a face carved from stone and eyes that could see a lie before it left your mouth. But that was before she came. It was a Thursday evening when the stagecoach rolled into town, stirring up dust and curiosity. From it stepped a woman no one had seen before, Lila Mae Carter. Her dark hair shone under the setting sun, and her traveling dress, though simple, spoke of a past not meant for towns like Dustwell. She carried herself with confidence, the kind that made people watch without realizing they were staring. By nightfall, she was standing on the small stage of the Silver Spur Saloon, singing a tune soft enough to hush a room full of rowdy men. Her voice floated like warm honey, sweet but filled with ache. The piano behind her was slightly out of tune, yet nobody cared. She sang of home, of trains leaving in the rain, and of dreams lost on the prairie wind. Elias Boone wasn't one for saloons, but duty sometimes brought him there, mostly to keep peace among those who drank too much and remembered too little the next morning. That night, though, he stopped by the swinging doors and stayed longer than he meant to. He told himself it was to make sure no trouble started. But when her eyes met his, brown, bright, and full of something he couldn't name, he forgot what he'd come for. After her song ended, he tipped his hat politely and left, but his steps were slower than usual. In the days that followed, talk spread through Dustwell like wildfire. The new singer was the only topic worth gossiping about. The blacksmith said she was too beautiful to be trusted. The baker's wife swore she saw her counting gold coins in the back room. The old bartender just shook his head and smiled, saying, "A woman like that doesn't just pass through. She's running from something." Boone ignored the talk at first, but he couldn't ignore the fact that his boots often carried him past the Silver Spur around evening. Sometimes he'd stand outside, pretending to check the hitching posts while her singing drifted out through the open windows. His deputy, Tommy Grant, noticed. "Sheriff," he teased one morning, "seems like your rounds are getting mighty musical lately." Boone only grunted in reply, though a faint smile tugged at his mouth. The truth was, Lila Mae had stirred something in him he hadn't felt in years. He'd lost his wife to fever 6 winters ago, and since then his life had been quiet. Too quiet. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Lila's presence was like sunlight through an old window, warming places he'd forgotten existed. But as the sheriff's attention drifted, the town began to change. Stagecoaches were being robbed on the outskirts. The first one lost only supplies. The second, a chest of silver coins meant for the railroad payroll. By the third robbery, one of the guards had been hurt, though not badly, and everyone in Dustwell was talking about the Red Butte Raiders, a group of clever outlaws who'd been causing trouble across nearby towns. Boone promised he'd track them down. But days turned into weeks, and the raiders stayed one step ahead. Each time he rode out with his men, they found nothing but empty tracks and mocking notes carved into trees. "Too slow, Sheriff." And all the while, Lila Mae kept singing. Sometimes after her show, Boone would walk her back to the small room she rented above the saloon. They'd talk a little on the porch about life back east, about the stars, about how the desert was both lonely and alive. She'd laugh softly, and the sheriff would forget the weight of his badge for a few minutes. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Lila asked him, "Sheriff Boone, do you ever get tired of being the good man all the time?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "Being good ain't something a man gets tired of," he said. "But sometimes it gets heavy," she smiled. "Then maybe you need someone to help carry it." Boone didn't know what to say, so he tipped his hat and walked away before his heart betrayed him. But Dustwell was small, and whispers traveled faster than the wind. Before long, people started saying the sheriff had gone soft, that his mind was on the singer instead of the saddle. The blacksmith claimed he saw Boone at the saloon when he should have been chasing bandits. The storekeeper said the sheriff and the singer were seen talking behind the stable at dusk. Even his deputy started to worry. Sheriff, folks are starting to talk, Tommy said one morning. They're saying the raiders could ride right into town and you'd be too busy watching her sing to notice. Boone's jaw tightened. I do my job, same as always. But deep down he knew the boy wasn't wrong. His thoughts were clouded and guilt sat heavy in his chest. The next week, news came that a stagecoach had been robbed just 10 miles out of Dustwell. One of the guards had been hurt this time, and people wanted answers. When Boone rode out to the scene, all he found was a set of tracks leading toward the canyon and a red scarf caught on a thorn bush. He held it in his hand for a long moment. It looked familiar. Back in town, as the sun set, he walked into the Silver Spur. The crowd was thick that night, the piano playing faster than usual, and Lila May was wearing a red dress that caught every eye in the room. When she saw him, her smile faltered for just a second. After her last song, she approached him. You look like a man carrying a storm, she said softly. Maybe I am, he replied. Where were you last night, Miss Carter? Her eyes widened slightly. Here, of course. Ask anyone. He nodded slowly but didn't press further. He couldn't bring himself to doubt her. Not yet. That night, Boone sat alone in his office, the lamplight flickering across the wanted posters on the wall. The Red Butte raiders stared back at him from the paper, their faces rough and unkind. He rubbed his eyes, thinking about how easily he had been distracted. Outside, the town was silent. Only the wind and the distant rattle of a loose shutter broke the stillness. When he finally stepped outside to lock the door, something caught his eye. A folded note pinned to the wood with a small silver hairpin. He pulled it free and opened it under the lamplight. The handwriting was neat, with a trace of perfume on the paper. It read, Sheriff, is your mind always on my body? Is that why you forgot to catch the outlaws? At the bottom was a red lipstick mark, faint but clear. Boone's hand trembled slightly as he folded the note. Whether it was a cruel joke, a warning, or a confession, he didn't know. But in that moment, one thing was certain. Dustwell was no longer quiet, and his heart had led him straight into a storm he might not escape. Sheriff Elias Boone didn't sleep that night. The words from the note kept circling in his mind like dust in the wind. Sheriff, is your mind always on my body? Is that why you forgot to catch the outlaws? He read it again and again, trying to understand what it meant. Was it a cruel joke from someone in town? Or was it from Lila May herself? And if it was from her, what was she trying to tell him? By sunrise, he decided one thing. He couldn't ignore it. Something was wrong, and he had to find out what. The next morning, Dustwell was already awake when Boone stepped out of his office. The townsfolk were gathered near the general store, whispering in low voices. He caught pieces of their talk. The raiders had struck again. This time, they'd taken a wagon full of supplies headed for a nearby ranch. Boone's chest tightened. The town had trusted him to protect them, and he had let them down again. Sheriff, said Deputy Tommy, hurrying up with worry in his eyes. Tracks lead south this time. Toward Coyote Canyon, Boone nodded. Saddle the horses. We ride in 10 minutes. As he turned to leave, he noticed something strange. The Silver Spur was closed. The saloon doors were shut tight, and there was no sound of a piano inside. That had never happened before, not since Lila May came to town. Boone felt a chill, though the sun was already high. He walked closer and knocked. No answer. He pushed the door open and stepped into the quiet room. The tables were empty. The air smelled of old perfume and dust. On the small stage, a single red scarf lay folded neatly. It was the same scarf he had found near the robbed stagecoach. He stared at it for a long time before whispering to himself, Lila, what have you done? When Tommy came in, Boone told him to gather a small group of men to follow the trail. Then he rode out ahead alone, the wind sharp against his face. He didn't know what waited for him in Coyote Canyon, outlaws, betrayal, or truth, but he had to face it. The ride was long and silent. The land stretched wide and empty, broken only by cactus and tumbleweed. Boone's mind wandered to the nights on Lila's porch, her laughter, her soft songs. He thought of the sadness in her eyes when she spoke about home. There had always been a shadow behind her smile. He saw it now more clearly than ever. When he reached the edge of Coyote Canyon, he dismounted and walked his horse slowly forward. The canyon walls rose high around him, glowing red and gold under the afternoon sun. Somewhere ahead, he heard faint voices. Boone crouched low and followed the sound until he saw them. 5 riders, their horses tied near a fire. And standing beside them was Lila May. His heart nearly stopped. She wasn't wearing her fine dress now. She looked tired, dusty, and afraid. One of the men was talking to her in a harsh tone, but she stood tall, her chin lifted. Boone couldn't hear the words, only the tremble in her voice when she replied. He waited until the men moved away from her, then stepped out quietly. Lila. She spun around, her eyes wide. Elias, what are you doing here? I should be asking you that, he said gently. You're with them, aren't you? The Red Butte Raiders. Her lips trembled. It's not what you think. Then tell me what to think, Boone said. For a moment she said nothing. Then she looked away, her voice barely a whisper. They're my family, Elias. My brother leads them. I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to keep him safe. Boone felt the ground shift under his boots. Your brother? She nodded. Jesse Carter. We were both orphans back east. He took the wrong road when we were young. I came here because he told me to. He said if I sang at the saloon, I could keep an eye on the sheriff's movements. He promised no one would get hurt. Boone's chest ached. And you believed him? I had to, she said. He's all I have left. But I never wanted to lie to you. There was silence between them, heavy and full of things left unsaid. Boone looked into her eyes, searching for the truth, and saw tears gathering there. Lila, he said softly, you could have told me. I wanted to, she whispered. Every night I wanted to. But I was afraid you'd put him in jail, and I couldn't bear to see you hate me. Boone looked away, struggling with the storm inside him. Duty and heart pulled in different directions, and both hurt just the same. Finally, he said, I can't let them keep hurting people, Lila. I swore to protect this town. I know, she said. That's why I came out here. I'm trying to stop him. They're planning one last robbery, something big. The payroll wagon from Santa Fe. I was going to warn you, but they found out I'd been asking questions. They won't listen to me anymore. Boone took a slow breath. Then let me help. Together they made a plan, simple, quiet, and careful. Lila would distract her brother long enough for Boone to get the stolen goods and lead the men away. She promised she could handle it, but things rarely go as planned. As evening settled over the canyon, the air grew cooler and shadows stretched long. Boone waited near the edge while Lila walked toward the campfire where the raiders sat. Her brother Jesse stood up to meet her. Boone couldn't hear their words, but he could see the argument in their gestures, her pleading, his anger. Then suddenly the men began to look around. They must have noticed something. Maybe the sound of Boone's horse, maybe just a feeling. Boone realized the plan was falling apart. He stepped out, hands open, voice calm. No one needs to get hurt. It's over. Lila turned sharply toward him. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Her brother's eyes filled with shock and confusion. Boone's heart heavy with regret. Then Jesse shouted something Boone couldn't make out and jumped on his horse, racing toward the canyon trail. Lila ran after him, calling his name. Boone followed, trying to stop them before anyone made a mistake. The chase ended at the narrow edge of the canyon where the earth dropped into deep shadows. Lila stood between her brother and Boone, her arms out, her voice breaking as she begged them to stop. Please, she said. Enough of this. It doesn't have to end this way. Her brother hesitated. He looked at her, then at Boone, and something in his face softened. He threw down the small bag he carried and turned his horse away. Boone let out a long breath, relief washing over him. The fight was over, but Lila was shaking. He'll be gone by morning, she said quietly. You'll never see him again. Boone looked at her with sadness in his eyes. And you? She smiled faintly. I'll stay long enough to set things right. After that, I'll go too. They rode back to Dustwell in silence. The stars came out one by one, filling the sky like scattered lanterns. When they reached the edge of town, Lila stopped her horse and turned to him. Elias, I never meant to hurt you. Everything I sang, every word was real. I know, he said softly. She handed him a small locket from around her neck. Keep this, she whispered. So you'll remember there was a woman who loved you once, even if she didn't deserve to. Before he could answer, she touched his arm gently and rode away into the darkness. Boone stood watching until she disappeared into the horizon. Days later, the stolen goods were returned, and the town of Dustwell slowly settled back into peace. People began to trust their sheriff again, though his eyes seemed older now, his smile rarer. On quiet evenings, Boone would ride out to the edge of the desert where the wind carried a faint echo of a woman's song. Sometimes he thought he saw a figure far off against the sunset, hair glinting like gold, but he never rode closer. He kept the locket in his pocket always. Inside it was a single word engraved in small letters: freedom. And though he went on keeping the law, deep down he knew that the hardest battles a man fights aren't always against outlaws. Sometimes they're against his own heart.